young black girl is patiently waiting in line to pay for her favorite items at a grocery store when she is suddenly accused by a wealthy white woman of blocking the checkout line. The woman goes further, falsely accusing the girl of stealing and calling security to have her thrown out. The story takes a dramatic turn when they unexpectedly meet again at the headquarters of a company where the black girl's father works. And when her father shows up, the white woman's life begins to take a completely different turn. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. It was a quiet Sunday morning at Greenfields Market, and the line at checkout lane 4 moved slowly but steadily. Amelia Carter stood quietly, her small canvas bag hanging from her shoulder, both hands gripping the plastic handle of a shopping basket that barely held 3 items: a carton of milk, a loaf of bread, and a bright red box of Honey Loop cereal. She rocked slightly on her toes, not out of impatience, but from excitement. In her head, she could already picture herself curled up on the living room rug later that morning, a bowl of her favorite cereal in her lap, watching the next episode of her animated show, the one with the girl who talked to animals. She didn't make a sound. She didn't fidget. She just waited the way her father had taught her. When you're out in public, he used to say, while helping her with her coat at the door, you keep your voice low, your body still, and your manners sharp. Speak only when you need to. That's respect. That's how people take you seriously. Amelia held on to those words like a rule carved in stone. She didn't try to draw attention to herself, didn't look around. Her eyes fixed on the conveyor belt ahead, willing it to move just a little faster so she could be done and get home before the cartoon started. But the moment of calm didn't last. The sharp clack of high heels on tile broke through the store's soft hum like a crack of thunder. The sound was precise and impatient, growing louder with each step. Amelia didn't turn, but she could feel it. Someone walking quickly toward her, their energy hot and fast and angry. Then came the voice, cold, clipped, and sharp with irritation. A woman speaking on the phone, not bothering to lower her voice. "No, I told them to send it by Friday. I'm not going to wait around for incompetence. Do it right, or don't do it at all." The call ended with an audible snap of a button. Amelia lowered her head just a little more. She didn't want to draw attention, but then the woman behind her muttered something not loud, but not quiet enough to be a secret. "Oh, for crying out loud," the woman hissed. "This line is moving like molasses." Typical. Absolutely typical. Amelia's ears burned. She clutched her basket tighter. Veronica Langford stood directly behind her. She was a white woman in her early 40s, tall, thin, with platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore an expensive cream-colored blazer over a silky blouse, dark tailored pants, and designer heels that clicked loudly every time she shifted her weight. Her nails were manicured to a gloss, her oversized sunglasses perched high on her head, revealing pale blue eyes, scanning the line with disdain. Her purse was monogrammed, her perfume strong and floral, and she was clearly in a hurry. She let out a loud sigh, then rolled her eyes dramatically. Her voice, while directed to no one in particular, was pitched just high enough to carry to everyone nearby. "This is ridiculous. Why are we all standing here wasting time behind people who don't even know how to shop properly?" Amelia flinched but stayed still. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She wasn't talking, wasn't moving, wasn't even looking around, just standing quietly like she was supposed to. Veronica crossed her arms and tapped one heel rapidly on the floor. Her frustration simmered visibly like water on the verge of boiling. She glanced at Amelia again, eyes narrowing as if confirming her assumptions. Then came another muttered complaint, louder this time. "Figures. Every time I come here, it's the same. Slow, disorganized, no sense of urgency. You'd think people would have some respect for other people's time." A man behind her looked up from his phone and shifted uncomfortably. A cashier paused slightly, but kept scanning items. But no one said a word. Amelia felt her shoulders tighten. Her mouth went dry. Then it happened. Veronica, now completely out of patience, raised her voice, not yelling, but loud enough to be unmistakably intentional. "Excuse me, is this child just going to stand there all day holding everyone up? Honestly, where are her parents? Doesn't anyone teach their kids basic manners anymore?" Amelia blinked. She still hadn't turned around. Her hands tightened around the handle of her basket. Veronica laughed dryly. "Figures. Just standing there, not saying a word, just clogging up space. Typical." The cashier looked uncomfortable now, glancing between Amelia and Veronica, but no one stepped in. No one said stop. The people nearby looked down at their phones or shifted awkwardly, pretending not to hear what was clearly being heard by everyone. Amelia looked down at her cereal box, her bottom lip trembling. She willed herself not to cry. Not here. Veronica sighed dramatically again. It's always the same thing. People like this dragging everything down. No respect for others, just taking up space. The words hit like a slap. Amelia's cheeks turned red. Her heart pounded in her chest, the sound rising in her ears. Her grip on the basket wavered. She turned slightly, not enough to meet the woman's eyes, but just enough to show that she heard. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out at first. Her throat felt too tight. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, not because she was guilty, but because she had been so careful, so polite, so quiet, and none of it had mattered. The line went still. The cashier paused again. The man behind Veronica looked away. A couple browsing magazines whispered to each other, but said nothing out loud. Amelia's eyes stayed down. She didn't run. She didn't speak. She didn't even cry yet. She stood there 10 years old in her soft blue dress and neat braids, looking smaller than ever, as if the floor might open beneath her feet. And in that moment, she wasn't just a little girl waiting in line. She was someone being judged out loud for something she hadn't done, for something she couldn't control, for the color of her skin and the assumptions that came with it. That moment hung in the air heavy and cruel, and no one moved to stop it. No one said, "That's not okay." No one turned to Veronica and told her she was wrong. No one shielded Amelia. And that silence hurt most of all, because in a world that claims to be better, to be more understanding, a little black girl still couldn't buy a box of cereal without being treated like she didn't belong. And the truth was, no child, no person should ever be made to feel like that. Not for the color of their skin, not for standing in line, not ever. Amelia turned slowly, her small hand still wrapped tightly around the red plastic basket, her eyes wide and unsure. She didn't want to look at the woman, but something in her told her she had to. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't show defiance. Her tone was soft, almost careful, like someone stepping over broken glass. "Ma'am," she said, barely above a whisper, "I'm just waiting in line. I haven't done anything wrong." Her voice was clear but small, the kind of voice that hoped reasoning might calm someone down, the kind of voice a child used when she still believed that fairness might matter. Her brown eyes looked up with a cautious mix of politeness and fear, but that only seemed to ignite something cruel in Veronica. The woman scoffed, loud and dismissive. "Oh, don't play innocent," she snapped. "I see your kind all the time, sneaking things when they think no one's watching." She leaned in, suddenly, face twisted with superiority, and before Amelia could even blink, Veronica's hand shot forward and yanked the basket out of the little girl's grasp. "Hey!" Amelia gasped, stumbling a step backward. The sudden motion startled the nearby shoppers. The basket hit the floor with a loud clatter, and the carton of milk rolled under the counter. The loaf of bread bounced once before coming to a stop near the register, but the cereal, Amelia's favorite cereal, crashed down sideways, the corner of the box splitting open. Golden flakes spilled across the clean tile floor like a small explosion. Amelia froze. It felt like the world had stopped. Her hands hovered in the air where the basket had just been. Her heart pounded in her chest, fast and uneven. She looked at the scattered food, then up at Veronica, not understanding how things had turned so quickly, so violently. Veronica pointed at the spilled cereal, her voice rising into a shrill, accusatory pitch that echoed across the front of the store. "Is this what you were trying to hide? Huh, thought you could sneak this past the register. Caught red-handed." Amelia's lips parted, but no sound came out. "I knew it," Veronica continued loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thieves always try to act innocent. Where are your parents? Who raised you to be like this?" There was a pause, a silence. Amelia felt every pair of eyes on her. She stood motionless, her face drained of color, her throat tightened until it ached. Her eyes stung. A hot tear rolled down her right cheek before she even knew it had begun to fall. I didn't do anything." She whispered the words, barely making it past her lips. Veronica rolled her eyes dramatically, then shouted toward the nearest checkout stand. "Security, get someone over here now." A stocky man in a navy blue shirt with the word security stitched across the chest appeared from the side aisle. His walk was brisk, purposeful. His face was unreadable. Veronica pointed directly at Amelia. "She tried to steal that cereal. She was hiding it in her basket and then started talking back when I caught her." The guard looked down at the scene spilled food, a crying child, a furious woman. "Miss, is this true?" he asked, his tone flat but direct. Amelia's mouth opened, but the words were stuck in her throat. Her hands shook. She looked down at her shoes, then back up at him. "No," she said softly. I was just waiting in line." "She's lying," Veronica interrupted, arms crossed, now confidence rising. "I saw her. She tried to slip it past. You need to escort her out. This is a place for paying customers, not—" She stopped herself short, but the implication hung in the air. The guard hesitated for a moment, glancing between Amelia and Veronica. Then finally he motioned toward the exit. "I think it's best you leave, miss. You can come back with an adult if there was a misunderstanding." Amelia blinked, stunned. "I didn't steal," she said again, barely audible. "Please, I didn't do anything." The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch her. But the way he stood, arms folded, body angled toward the door, was all the signal she needed. Slowly, Amelia bent down to pick up her cereal. Her fingers trembled. The box was crushed on one corner, cereal still spilling from the open seam. She gathered it as best she could, blinking rapidly to clear her vision. She picked up the loaf of bread next, holding it to her chest, then looked around for the milk. It was gone, slid too far under the counter to reach. No one helped. The shoppers behind her avoided eye contact. A woman in yoga pants whispered something to her husband. A teenager near the candy display took a step back. The cashier pretended to organize the plastic bags. No one said a word. No one questioned the accusation. No one stepped forward. No one asked what really happened. Amelia stood there in the middle of the store she had entered so excitedly just minutes ago and felt herself shrink. Her body was trembling, but she held her head as high as she could. "I didn't steal," she repeated one last time, mostly to herself. Then she turned and began walking toward the automatic doors, her small frame carrying a box of broken cereal and a loaf of bread against her chest, like they were the only things tethering her to the ground. The store's doors opened with the same soft whoosh, but this time the breeze felt colder. Behind her, Veronica adjusted her purse strap and scoffed loudly. Unbelievable. And still, no one said a word. Amelia stepped out into the morning sunlight, tears now freely falling down her cheeks. Cheeks that had only minutes earlier been flushed with the warmth of anticipation and joy. Her walk was slow, careful, like she was afraid of doing anything else wrong. She sat down on the concrete steps just outside the store. The concrete steps in front of Greenfield's Market felt cold beneath Amelia's legs. Her dress bunched under her knees, and the breeze that once felt refreshing now made her shiver. Her hands were still slightly sticky from the broken cereal box she had cradled moments earlier. Her phone rested in her lap screen, glowing faintly against the early morning light. She didn't cry loudly. There were no sobs, no wailing, no outbursts. Just quiet. Just a still kind of sadness that sat heavy in her chest, like a brick placed gently but firmly on her heart. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her sleeve. Then she took a breath and picked up her phone. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the screen and opened the message app. Her thumbs hovered for a moment. She had to choose her words carefully. Her dad was always calm, strong. She didn't want to make him upset, but she couldn't hold it in anymore. She typed slowly. "Dad, I just got kicked out of the store. A woman said I was stealing. I didn't. She yelled at me in front of everyone. I'm outside now. I'm scared." She stared at the message for a moment, then hit send. The second she did, her shoulders slumped forward. She curled her arms around her legs and leaned her chin against her knees. Her breath came in shallow puffs. She watched as cars rolled in and out of the parking lot, people carrying grocery bags, chatting on their phones, walking past her like she wasn't even there. Her phone buzzed less than a minute later. Dad calling. She swiped to answer, bringing the phone to her ear. "Hi, baby," came the voice on the other end. It was deep, warm, steady. Amelia didn't respond right away. The moment she heard her father's voice, all the walls she had tried to keep up began to crack. Her lips quivered. "Daddy," she finally whispered. "I got your message," he said, and even though his voice remained calm, there was something in the way he paused, just a breath between words, that said he was holding back more than he let on. "Are you hurt?" "No." Amelia shook her head slowly, even though he couldn't see her. "Just embarrassed. Everybody was staring at me. They made me leave. I didn't do anything wrong. I promise." "You don't have to promise me that," Malcolm said gently. "I believe you." There was a moment of silence on both ends. Then he spoke again, voice still, even, but firm. "Listen to me carefully, Amelia. You did nothing wrong. Not one thing. I know who you are. I know the kind of girl you are. You're honest. You're thoughtful. You speak up when it matters. You did everything right. But she yelled so loud, Amelia said, tears returning to her eyes. She said I was stealing. And when I tried to explain, nobody believed me, not even the security guard. I'm sorry that happened to you, Malcolm said, and now his voice had dropped lower, quieter, but carrying weight. It wasn't right. None of it. And it breaks my heart that you had to stand there alone. Amelia swallowed hard. I tried not to cry. I wanted to stay strong like you. You were strong, he said instantly. You're stronger than you know. Most adults wouldn't have handled that the way you did. The knot in Amelia's chest loosened just a little. She pulled her sleeves over her hands and wiped her face again. Her breathing slowed. Where are you now? He asked. Still outside, on the steps. Okay, stay there. Stay where it's safe. I'll come get you if you need, or I can send someone from the office. But first, I need you to hear this. She listened. What that woman did, what that store allowed, it wasn't just wrong, it was harmful. It wasn't about the cereal. It was about who they think you are. But they don't know you. I know you. And no matter what anyone says, you are not less than. You are not guilty because someone with more money, more power, or lighter skin says so. Amelia looked down at her shoes, the laces frayed at the ends. She nodded quietly, her lips pressed together. Your voice matters, Malcolm continued. Your presence matters. You're my daughter, and you carry yourself with pride. What happened today says more about them than it ever could about you. Amelia didn't speak. She just listened. And little by little, the weight in her chest began to lift. I'll take care of it, her father said after a moment. You don't have to worry about that. Will she get in trouble? Amelia asked softly. That's not your burden to carry, he replied. But yes, there will be accountability. She nodded again this time with a little more confidence. Okay, can you get a ride home or should I send a car? He asked. I think I can walk. It's not far. All right, he said. Call me the moment you get inside. Lock the door and get that cereal again next time, okay? Don't let today change the way you live your life. Okay, Daddy, she said, and now her voice was steadier. I'm proud of you, Amelia, he said, his tone softening again. I love you more than anything. I love you too. They ended the call. Amelia looked at the phone for a moment longer, then slipped it back into her tote bag. Her hands were no longer shaking. She stood up slowly, brushed off the back of her dress, and took a deep breath. She turned to look at the store once more. Through the glass, she could still see people in line. The cereal aisle was just beyond the registers. It was all still there, just as normal as it was before. But it wasn't normal anymore. She knew something had changed. In her. In the world around her. And she didn't yet have the words to explain it, but she knew she'd remember this day for a long time. Still, she walked down the sidewalk toward home, her back straighter than before. Her steps were quiet, but there was purpose in them, a quiet strength, because even though her father wasn't beside her, his words were. And sometimes a father doesn't need to be right next to his child. He just needs to show up the moment she needs him most. The following Monday morning, the sky over downtown was a soft gray, the kind of color that made the sunlight feel distant and the air feel heavier than usual. Traffic moved slowly through the streets, and office buildings buzzed quietly with the start of another work week. Inside the glass tower of Nova Edge Systems, the lobby was already busy. People in suits moved in and out, tapping badges at security gates, sipping coffee, checking emails, eyes fixed on their schedules. Amelia Carter stood just inside the entrance, her canvas tote bag slung over one shoulder, clutching a sealed brown envelope with both hands. Her shoes were polished, her dress clean, and pressed her braids neat and tied back with matching blue clips. She had woken up extra early that morning, wanting to look her best. This was important. Her dad had trusted her with a task, and she was determined to do it right. Malcolm had called from his office around 7. I forgot an important document at home, he had said. The partnership contract. It's on my desk in the blue folder. Think you can bring it to me, kiddo, Amelia had answered immediately. Of course. He had told her to ask for him at the front desk. He'd come down himself to get it. It was supposed to be simple, quick, no pressure. But as Amelia stepped farther into the lobby, something in her chest tightened. The scale of the place overwhelmed her. The marble floors gleamed beneath bright recessed lighting. Digital displays blinked softly behind sleek glass counters. Employees walked fast, confident, clipped, all dressed in sharp, formal clothes that didn't wrinkle or bunch. She suddenly felt small, out of place, like she'd wandered into a space not meant for children. Still, she walked up to the reception desk, taking a steady breath, and waited for the woman behind the counter to finish organizing a stack of papers. Before she could speak, she heard it. The sound of heels. The same sound from the grocery store 2 days ago. Sharp, measured, familiar. Her stomach dropped. The rhythm of the steps drew closer. Amelia slowly turned her head toward the sound, her heart now thudding in her chest. And there she was, Veronica Langford, the woman from the store, the woman who had accused her of stealing, who had embarrassed her in front of dozens of strangers, who had gotten her kicked out without even listening. Today, Veronica looked no less intimidating. She wore a tailored white blazer over a crimson blouse, black dress pants, and heels that echoed with every step. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect bun. Her phone was tucked under her arm, and a slim laptop case hung from her shoulder. She was mid-stride, speaking with someone over her earpiece, before turning sharply and heading toward the front desk. Amelia instinctively took a step back, her breath catching. She tried to stay calm, but her fingers gripped the folder tighter. She hoped foolishly that maybe Veronica wouldn't notice her. Maybe she would walk right past. But Veronica stopped. She blinked once in recognition. Then her mouth curled. "Oh," she said, her voice already dripping with contempt. "You again." Amelia didn't respond. She looked up at the receptionist, then down at the folder in her hands. She just needed to tell them she was there for her dad. That was all. "What are you doing here?" Veronica asked louder now. "Let me guess. Lost. Or maybe trying to sneak into someplace you don't belong." "I'm just here to deliver something," Amelia said quietly, not meeting her eyes. Veronica scoffed. "Deliver something?" "Right. I've heard that before." She looked around the lobby, drawing attention. Whose idea was it to let kids run errands in corporate buildings? Or does your mom mop the floors here and you tagged along? The receptionist looked up now, brows furrowing. She glanced from Veronica to Amelia, clearly confused. I'm here to give this to my dad," Amelia said softly, lifting the envelope slightly. Veronica narrowed her eyes. "Your dad? Really? And who would that be?" "The janitor security." Amelia didn't answer. Her voice caught in her throat. This wasn't the first time she'd been humiliated by this woman, but somehow this time felt worse. She wasn't in a store. She was standing in her father's company. She had done exactly what was asked of her, and still she was being treated like a threat. Veronica took a step closer. "You don't look like you belong here," she said, voice low now, but just as cruel. "Honestly, if I didn't know better, I'd say you were casing the place." Amelia's hands trembled slightly as she held on to the envelope. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. But her eyes darted toward the elevator bank behind the reception desk. If she could just make it up to her dad's floor, this would all be over. Before she could speak again, Veronica turned to the receptionist. "You might want to check who this girl belongs to," she said. "She was caught shoplifting the other day. I'm surprised she's not banned from public spaces." The receptionist froze, unsure how to respond. She looked at Amelia, who stood perfectly still, blinking back heat behind her eyes. The envelope was pressed tightly against her chest, now like a shield. Veronica's words rang out again, clear and biting. "This is exactly why places like this need better security. You never know who's going to walk through those doors pretending to be something they're not." Amelia felt like her lungs were shrinking. Her heart beat fast, each thump louder than the last. She looked down at the floor. She could hear people murmuring nearby, conversations slowing, glances beginning to shift. She wasn't sure if she could move, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know if she could keep standing if she tried. Because even though she had walked in proud, even though her father had told her she was strong, this moment, this woman was pulling her right back into that same feeling from the grocery store, that feeling of being invisible and exposed at the same time. She clutched the folder tighter, trying to steady her breathing, trying to remember her dad's words from the day before. "You're honest. You're thoughtful. You speak up when it matters." But right now, speaking up felt impossible, and all she could think was how unfair it was. How someone could see her, just her skin, her clothes, her size, and decide they already knew everything about her. That wasn't just hurtful, it was dangerous. Because if someone like Veronica held power in places like this, inside glass towers and boardrooms, how many others had to stay quiet just to get through the door? And how many children like her had been turned away before anyone ever listened? Amelia stayed frozen in place, waiting, wanting this moment to end, not knowing that just a few floors above her father had already left his desk, because he had seen the text, and he was on his way down. Amelia stood frozen near the reception desk, her back stiff, the envelope still clutched tight against her chest. Her fingers had gone numb from gripping it too long. Her eyes stayed down, fixed on the marble floor, but her ears caught everything, every judgmental word, every breathy scoff, every sharp comment from Veronica. She didn't move, not when Veronica leaned in again, not when she waved a hand dismissively toward the security guard, not even when she tilted her head and muttered under her breath, "Somebody needs to teach you where you belong." But when Veronica's voice rose a pitch higher, cutting the air like a blade, Amelia felt a tremor go through her spine. "You just keep standing there with that little envelope like it means something," Veronica sneered. "I could have someone walk you out right now." Amelia's chest rose and fell unevenly. She could barely hold the tears back. But this time, she didn't cry. She reached into her tote bag with one trembling hand and pulled out her phone. She tapped out a short message. "Dad, I'm downstairs. She's here again. She won't let me come up." She hit send. Just seconds later, her phone vibrated. "On my way. Don't move." Amelia kept the phone in her hand, staring at that screen, her heart pounding louder than anything else in the room. Veronica, still unaware, turned back to the receptionist. "I'm sorry," she said with a false laugh, "but someone needs to set boundaries around here. This isn't a playground." Then she turned back to Amelia and stepped closer, her tone suddenly colder. Her eyes scanned the girl's clothes again, her lip curled. "Where's your mother anyway?" she asked. Picking up trash on the side of the building, Amelia said nothing. The lobby doors opened behind them. Veronica didn't notice. She kept talking. "You shouldn't be here. Not unless you're cleaning the windows or delivering lunch. Whatever this little stunt is, it ends now." Her hand lifted slightly, not in a threatening way, but in that patronizing gesture adults sometimes make when they want to shoo a child away, like brushing off lint. She raised her voice again, her tone sharp. "Move along." And then she froze, because another voice, firm, unmistakable, cutting clean through the lobby, spoke from just behind her shoulder. "Veronica." Her body stiffened. She turned slowly. Standing only a few feet away was Malcolm Carter. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that fit like it was made for him. His tie was deep navy, his shoes polished, and his posture straight as a steel beam. His face was calm, too calm, but his eyes were cold, piercing, focused directly on her. Veronica blinked. "Mr. Carter." But he didn't look at her. He stepped past her, crossing the marble floor with slow, deliberate steps, and went straight to Amelia. He knelt slightly, put a steady hand on her shoulder, and looked her in the eyes. "You okay?" he asked softly. Amelia nodded, her bottom lip trembling now for the first time. "I didn't say anything," she whispered. "I was just waiting like you told me." "I know," he said, giving her shoulder a light squeeze. "You did everything right." He straightened up and turned toward Veronica, who stood frozen in place, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her blazer. "Veronica," he said again, voice flat, "this young lady you've been insulting is my daughter." The words dropped like a stone in still water. The lobby went silent. The receptionist's mouth fell open slightly. The security guard took a half step back. Employees walking through the lobby slowed their eyes, shifting from Amelia to Malcolm to Veronica. Veronica's face drained of color. "I'm Mr. Carter, I didn't know." Malcolm raised one hand calmly, stopping her mid-sentence. "That much is obvious." He turned his head slightly and addressed the receptionist without changing tone. "Is the envelope she's holding the one marked for my office?" The receptionist nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Malcolm reached for it gently. Amelia handed it to him without a word. Then in front of everyone, without raising his voice, without breaking eye contact, he tore the envelope open. Inside was a crisp, final contract between Nova Edge Systems and Vega Tech Solutions, Veronica's company. He looked at the first page, then at Veronica, and without pause, he ripped the entire contract in half. The tearing sound echoed in the quiet room. One rip, then another. He tore it again, then again, until the pages were folded over in shreds, hanging in his hands like useless paper. Veronica's eyes widened. She stepped forward, panic rising. "Mr. Carter, please," she said, her voice suddenly higher. "That deal is over," he said, cutting her off. "Completely." She froze. "You came here to finalize a partnership," Malcolm continued, "and instead you revealed your character before the ink was even dry." Her mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. Malcolm dropped the shredded contract into the trash bin near the receptionist's desk. Then he turned to the room. "I want everyone in this lobby to understand something clearly," he said, his voice calm but commanding. This company does not tolerate discrimination, it does not excuse arrogance, and it absolutely does not welcome people who humiliate children, my child, because of how they look." Veronica's hands shook now. Her face had turned pale, her lips slightly parted. "I'm sorry," she said, reaching out slightly. "I didn't know who she was." "It doesn't matter who she is," Malcolm said, taking a step closer. "That's the entire point." He let the silence hang for a moment. Then he looked back to Amelia. "You ready to head up with me?" She nodded slowly, her voice too tight to speak. He placed a hand gently on her back and guided her toward the elevators. As the doors opened, Malcolm glanced back over his shoulder one last time. "Have someone escort Miss Langford out," he said to the receptionist. The elevator doors closed behind them. The entire lobby stood still, and Veronica Langford, once poised and powerful, stood alone, trembling in the center of the floor with nothing left to say. Because justice didn't come that day with shouting or drama. It came quietly, with a father's hand on his daughter's shoulder, with torn paper in a trash bin, and with a single devastating truth. Sometimes the only thing that needs to be said is said through action. The elevator ride was silent, but for Amelia, it felt like something deep inside her was finally breathing again. She stood beside her father, her shoulder gently brushing against his suit jacket. His presence alone made the air feel safer. Her heart still beat fast from everything that had just happened, but the tremble in her hands had stopped. She knew he had seen it, all of it, and he didn't let it slide. Upstairs, they entered his office quietly. Malcolm didn't say much. He offered her a juice box from the mini fridge near the window. She took it with both hands and sat on the couch legs swinging just above the floor. Her father walked to his desk, placed the now shredded contract remains in the trash, and finally exhaled. He stood for a moment, watching the city skyline through the glass wall, eyes steady, jaw tight. But what neither of them knew yet was that justice had only just begun. Down in the lobby, one of the employees who had witnessed everything had quietly recorded the last few minutes of the confrontation. The video was less than 2 minutes long. It started with Veronica's sharp words caught clearly by the phone's microphone. "You again, trying to sneak into someplace you don't belong." It showed Amelia, small and still. It captured Malcolm's calm walk toward his daughter, and it captured every word he said. From "this young lady is my daughter" to the moment he ripped the contract in front of her. The video ended with the elevator doors closing behind them, Veronica standing alone, visibly shaken. The employee uploaded the clip to social media without a caption, just a hashtag, #RealLeadership. Within hours, it was everywhere. People didn't just watch it, they shared it, commented, clipped it again, slowed it down, paused on Amelia's face, on Veronica's, on Malcolm's firm, unwavering stance. They quoted his line about character, about dignity, about how it doesn't matter who she is, that's the entire point. The internet had seen enough stories of injustice to know exactly what this was, and they were not about to let it go. By noon, the video had passed 100,000 views. By evening, it was trending nationwide. People flooded the comments. This is exactly why representation matters. That little girl stood there alone, and her dad showed up. That's how you protect your children. She thought her position would protect her. But power without respect means nothing. Others dug deeper. It didn't take long before Veronica Langford's name was discovered, her LinkedIn profile, her position at Vegatech, her history of client relations. The headlines followed fast. Executive humiliates child in lobby, gets publicly shut down by company CEO. Vegatech deal canceled over discrimination incident. By the next morning, Vegatech's PR team was in crisis mode. They issued a vague statement. "We are currently reviewing internal conduct policies following an unfortunate misunderstanding involving one of our associates." It didn't help. In fact, it made things worse. Because the public wasn't calling this a misunderstanding. They were calling it what it was: discrimination, humiliation, and entitlement. The pressure mounted quickly. By midweek, Vegatech released a new statement: Veronica Langford has been removed from all client-facing roles pending further review. But internally, things moved faster. Behind closed doors, Veronica was summoned by the executive board. Her direct supervisor sat stiffly across from her, a printed version of the torn contract on the table between them. "This deal was worth $8 million, he said quietly, fingers tapping the tabletop, "and now it's gone. I didn't know she was his daughter." Veronica muttered, still defensive. She was just standing there. No one said who she was. And what if she wasn't his daughter? He asked sharply. Would that have made your behavior acceptable? She didn't answer. You made a scene in a partner's lobby. You humiliated a child in front of staff. You escalated a situation you had no business engaging in, and now your face is plastered across every tech headline in the country. I was just trying to keep order, she said weakly. I didn't mean. He cut her off. You didn't think. That's the problem. You believed your status gave you the right to make assumptions, and now we're paying the price for it. Veronica's voice lowered. So what happens now? You're being reassigned, he said coldly. Effective immediately. You are no longer a senior client partner. You'll be moved to internal administration. No client contact, no speaking engagements, no decision-making roles. She sat still, jaw tightening. You'll retain basic salary, he added, but all bonuses and leadership tracks are revoked. This is non-negotiable. Veronica's hands curled slightly in her lap. You can't do this to me. I built accounts. I led teams. You destroyed trust, he replied, and you cost us a contract because of your ego. He stood. You should be grateful we're not terminating you outright. The meeting ended there. Veronica left the conference room slowly, heels clicking against the floor, quieter than usual this time. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a flat line. She passed coworkers in the hallway who looked away politely or whispered as she walked by. The air felt different now, colder. In her office, she closed the door and sank into her chair. The computer screen glowed with dozens of unread emails, notifications, headlines, tweets, comments, some calling her out by name, others demanding her resignation, still others saying what she feared most. This is what happens when people think they're untouchable. Title doesn't matter. Character does. Veronica sat still for a long time. She replayed the moment in the lobby again and again in her mind. The girl's silence, the calm look in Malcolm's eyes, the ripping sound of the contract. For the first time, she didn't feel outraged. She felt exposed, because it wasn't just the video. It was the truth. She had spoken to a child like she was less than human, twice, and the world had seen it. Her job title hadn't saved her. Her resume hadn't protected her. Her tailored clothes, her high heels, her years of experience, none of it could erase the image burned into millions of screens, a woman with power abusing it, and a father ending it with one quiet act. The fallout wasn't just personal, it was public. And it was far from over, because when the world sees injustice laid bare, they don't ask for apologies. They demand change. And sometimes the only way to start that change is to bring someone down from where they thought they could never fall, because status does not excuse cruelty. And in the eyes of justice, title means nothing without decency. Veronica Langford sat alone at her desk in a dimly lit corner office, the blinds half drawn, letting in streaks of gray daylight. The office used to feel like a place of power, glass, steel, quiet dominance. Now it felt like a cage. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as the cursor blinked on an empty social media post. Her phone buzzed beside her with more unread messages, more headlines, more mentions she didn't want to see. Her inbox had turned into a graveyard of withdrawn meetings and formal HR memos. Her face, once associated with professional success, had become a meme, a warning. She stared at the screen and clenched her jaw. No, she whispered to herself, I won't go down like this. In the next hour, she created a brand new anonymous account on ConnectWire, a social media platform frequented by corporate professionals and media watchdogs. Using a temporary email, she typed slowly but deliberately, choosing every word with care. She masked her tone in professionalism, but every sentence was sharpened with bitterness. Inside Nova Edge, when power becomes tyranny. After a single misinterpreted moment, a respected businesswoman is punished without due process. All because the CEO chose personal emotion over business logic. Is this how corporate America protects its brand at what cost? She posted it. Then another. This company is run by fear, not fairness. Executives are afraid to speak the truth. People of influence can ruin your career with a word. Ask yourself, who's really abusing power here? Veronica watched as the posts gained traction. Shares trickled in. A few comments appeared, some vague agreement, some outrage. Within minutes, a small circle of followers engaged with the content, not knowing who wrote it. Anonymous accounts echoed her words. A few fringe commentators picked it up. The post began showing up in niche blogs. But what Veronica didn't anticipate, what she couldn't control, was the response from Nova Edge employees. That same morning, a junior marketing coordinator named Priya Patel sat in the company cafe, scrolling through her feed when she saw the posts. Her brows furrowed. She recognized the writing style, the tone. It sounded like Veronica. Cold, strategic, twisting facts to protect ego. She looked around the room and saw others reading too. She stood up, walked back to her desk, and began typing. As a Nova Edge employee, I feel the need to speak up. I watched the original video. I've worked under Veronica Langford before. What happened in that lobby wasn't a one-time thing. It was just the first time someone stood up to it publicly. That post spread faster than Veronica's ever could. Others followed. A software developer named Jordan Chen shared his experience in a thread. I was once told by Veronica during a lunch meeting that I spoke surprisingly well for someone with an accent. It was said with a smile, but it wasn't a compliment. I kept quiet then. I won't anymore. Then came more. An HR assistant who had left the company the previous year wrote Veronica once told a black intern in our team that her hairstyle looked too urban for client meetings. I filed a complaint. It was buried. And then the floodgates opened. Dozens of comments, then hundreds, from former interns, from entry-level analysts, from assistance coordinators, even senior staff. Stories of microaggressions, dismissive remarks, humiliating corrections in front of clients. Subtle, consistent patterns that had gone unchecked for years. Some employees posted screenshots of old emails, carefully redacted, but clearly damning. Others recorded short videos, eyes-steady voices, unwavering, stating what they had experienced. The most striking post came from a woman named Clara Bennett, who had worked under Veronica 5 years prior and left the company after only 6 months. I left because I couldn't take the daily belittling. Veronica once told me in front of a client that I was only hired because of diversity numbers. I never spoke up. I thought no one would believe me. But seeing that little girl in the video, seeing how calmly she stood, how quietly she endured, made me realize I can't stay quiet anymore. Clara's post went viral. News outlets picked up the wave of testimonials. Some reached out for interviews. Local news stations ran the story that evening with the headline, "Corporate Reckoning Employees Speak Out Against Disgraced Executive Following Viral Video." By the next morning, Nova Edge's leadership team called an emergency meeting. The CEO had already been briefed. The legal team confirmed the anonymous post matched the IP range of Veronica's temporary account. It was clear she was behind the campaign to discredit the company. It didn't take long. She was summoned once again to the boardroom. This time there were no introductions, no polite greetings. The tone was final. Malcolm Carter sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "You went behind the company's back," he said. "You tried to smear our reputation to save your own, and in doing so, you've confirmed everything we feared." "I was defending myself," Veronica replied, her voice tighter than usual. "You left me no choice." "You had a choice," Malcolm said calmly. "You had 100, and you chose this." He gestured to the screen behind him, which displayed a collage of employee testimonials pulled live from the platform. Veronica stared at the screen. Her eyes flicked over her name, her words, their words, screenshots, headlines, faces, truths. The silence in the room was heavy. "This company is built on trust," Malcolm continued, "between employees, between leadership, between us and the people we serve. You shattered that trust." He paused, then said clearly, "You are terminated effective immediately." Veronica blinked. "No review?" she asked, stunned. "No appeal?" "There's nothing left to review," he said. "Your actions speak for themselves." She sat motionless. Her face didn't show outrage. Not this time. Just disbelief. She was escorted back to her office to collect her things. A security officer stood by the door as she packed in silence. No one came to say goodbye. No one looked up as she walked down the hallway. The silence was colder than any word that could have been spoken. By noon, her name was removed from all company directories, her access revoked, her office badge deactivated. By that evening, news sites updated their headlines. Veronica Langford fired after online retaliation backfires. Employees' voices overpower corporate cover-up attempt. Veronica sat in her apartment later that night alone, the glow of her laptop casting long shadows across the room. She refreshed her feed. Every minute brought more responses, more fallout, more calls for accountability in other companies. Her name was now a cautionary tale, not a credential. She reached for her phone to text someone, anyone, but stopped herself. There was no one left. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. And for the first time, she realized something she had never truly believed before. Status doesn't protect you from truth, because while lies move fast, the truth moves with weight. And once it catches up, it doesn't let go. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the last headline about Veronica Langford faded from the trending lists. The internet had moved on, as it always does. But for those involved, the ripple effects lingered quietly in the spaces people don't talk about, inside homes, around dinner tables, and deep within one's sense of self. That Saturday morning, the sun peeked out through scattered clouds, casting a soft glow over Greenfields Market. The parking lot buzzed with weekend families, carts creaking over asphalt, and voices murmuring through automatic doors. Inside, a familiar calm returned just shoppers' lists and routine. Malcolm Carter pushed a shopping cart slowly through the cereal aisle, one hand on the handle, the other in his pocket. Beside him walked Amelia, wearing a light green hoodie and jeans, her braids tied into a ponytail. She scanned the shelves, smiling as she found the same box of Honey Crunch squares she'd tried to buy that day weeks ago, the day everything had changed. "Got it," she said, lifting the box and placing it carefully into the cart. Malcolm looked down at her with a soft smile. "Still your favorite, huh?" Amelia nodded. "Always." They turned the corner toward the checkout lanes, the cart half full with Basics milk fruit bread juice. Amelia was humming quietly to herself when Malcolm's pace suddenly slowed. His eyes focused ahead, subtle but unmistakable. Amelia followed his gaze. At register 5, the same one where Amelia once stood, accused, a woman was placing a small set of items onto the conveyor belt: eggs, a small bag of rice, a loaf of discounted bread. She looked thinner than before. Her blonde hair, once tied back in a tight, elegant bun, now fell loosely over her shoulders. Her posture was different, smaller somehow. She wore a plain cardigan and dark jeans. No designer heels, no sunglasses, no perfume that filled the air. It was Veronica. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. She froze in place, fingers curling slightly around the cart's edge. Veronica hadn't noticed them yet. She was talking softly to the cashier, her voice low, tired. She opened her wallet, frowned, then pulled out a debit card. The cashier scanned it. A red light blinked. Insufficient funds. I thought I had enough," Veronica said quickly, voice shaky. "I can take the eggs off, or maybe the rice." The cashier nodded politely and began removing items. Malcolm looked down at his daughter, who still hadn't spoken. "You okay?" he asked gently. Amelia nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so." She took a step forward before he could say anything else. They approached the register just as the cashier was placing Veronica's eggs into a return bin. Veronica turned and saw them. She froze. Her eyes met Amelia's first, and for a second, she didn't move. Her mouth opened slightly as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. Her gaze shifted to Malcolm, then quickly back to the counter. "I'll just take the bread," she said softly to the cashier. Malcolm stepped forward, placing his hand lightly on the counter. "I've got it," he said. The cashier looked at him, unsure. Veronica blinked, surprised. "No, you don't have to." "I want to," Malcolm replied simply. "It's not a problem." She stood still, lips pressed together. Her shoulders rose as she took in a slow, shaky breath. "Thank you," she said. "I mean it." Malcolm nodded once. Veronica turned toward Amelia, her hands trembling slightly as she tucked her wallet away. "Amelia," she said, voice fragile, "I don't expect you to believe anything I say, and I know sorry doesn't fix what I did, but I need to say it anyway." Amelia's expression was unreadable. Her father stood beside her, silent, letting her decide how to respond. "I was cruel," Veronica continued, her voice cracking, "and I was wrong. I saw you and judged you and treated you like you were nothing. I've had a lot of time to sit with that, to live with it, and I'm so sorry." The store noise faded into the background as Amelia looked at the woman in front of her. This wasn't the Veronica from the lobby or the checkout line weeks ago. This woman looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally. Her pride, her position gone. Amelia looked at the small bag of groceries in Veronica's hand. "You didn't have to say that," she said quietly. "I did," Veronica replied. "I needed to." There was another pause. Then Amelia tilted her head slightly and asked, "Have you eaten yet today?" Veronica blinked. Not really." Amelia glanced up at her father, then back to Veronica. "We were going to stop by that cafe next door after this," she said. "You could join us, if you want." Veronica looked stunned. "I don't think I should." "You don't have to talk," Amelia said. "You can just eat." Veronica hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. "I'd like that." They finished checking out in silence. Malcolm paid for both orders, waving off Veronica's attempts to reimburse him. They left the store together, three people who not long ago had stood on opposite sides of one of the most public corporate confrontations in recent memory. Now they walked into a cafe on the corner of Main and Ellis, where the clatter of plates and the smell of coffee made the world feel just a little less tense. They sat at a small booth by the window. Amelia ordered pancakes. Veronica asked for tea. Malcolm had black coffee. There were no cameras this time, no audience, just a moment of quiet understanding. A beginning. Because forgiveness doesn't erase what happened, but sometimes it's the only way to let healing begin. And those who have the strength to forgive, especially the ones who were wronged, carry something greater than power. They carry peace. 3 weeks after their quiet breakfast together, Malcolm sat at his desk, staring out the tall glass window of his office at Nova Edge Systems. The city skyline looked different in the soft morning light. Less intimidating, more hopeful. On his desk, 2 folders lay open. One contained notes for an upcoming partnership pitch. The other had a resume familiar, though recently updated. He reached for his phone, paused for a second, then tapped her number. "Hello, Veronica," Malcolm said, his tone even professional. "Do you have a moment?" A quiet beat passed on the line before she replied. "Yes, of course. I've been reviewing some restructuring in our operations team," he continued. "We're building out a new internal compliance and documentation unit. It needs someone detail-oriented, quiet strength, resilience. I think you'd be a good fit." There was silence on the other end. Malcolm waited. He knew this was unexpected. "I don't know what to say," Veronica replied finally, her voice low. "I'm not sure that's a door I have any right to walk through." "You didn't ask for it," he said simply. "I opened it." She let out a breath, shaky but not defensive. "I've made mistakes, public ones, big ones." "I know," Malcolm said, "but mistakes aren't the end unless we choose to stop growing. You've faced consequences. You apologized. And from what I've seen, you've started changing. But change needs space and support." She was quiet again. "This isn't about charity," he added. "It's about whether you want a second chance and whether you're willing to earn it." Veronica swallowed hard on the other end of the line. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it. I'll start over." And she meant it. That following Monday, Veronica walked through the same glass doors at Nova Edge, but this time, no designer heels, no expensive briefcase, no air of entitlement. She wore a plain navy blouse, black slacks, and carried a small black laptop bag over her shoulder. She greeted the receptionist with a quiet smile, waited patiently for her ID badge, and made her way to a small cubicle on the 3rd floor, far from the boardrooms and corner offices she used to frequent. Her title was Simple Internal Operations Assistant. Her job to audit contracts, verify document trails, and provide support to junior analysts. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. The first few weeks were quiet. Most of her coworkers kept their distance, at first unsure what to say. She didn't push. She listened, observed, showed up early, stayed late, and when mistakes happened, she owned them without excuses. She never mentioned her past role, and slowly, people noticed. They noticed the way she triple-checked her work before sending it out, how she brought coffee for the intern who had stayed late revising a project, how she never interrupted in meetings, how she thanked the admin staff each morning like clockwork, how she once stood up quietly but firmly when she heard another staff member make a dismissive comment about a new hire's accent. "No one should feel small here," she had said. That moment reached Malcolm's desk before lunch. By month 3, Veronica had become someone people went to when they wanted help reading complex policy documents. She didn't offer opinions unless asked, but when she spoke, she was measured, thoughtful, careful with her words. The fire that once scorched others now burned inward fuel for growth, not destruction. Amelia visited her father's office one Friday after school. She wandered into the cafe downstairs while waiting and paused when she spotted Veronica sitting at a table near the window, typing on a tablet. Veronica noticed her too and gave a slight wave. Amelia walked over slowly. "Hi." "Hi," Veronica replied, setting her tablet down. "Your dad's upstairs, I think." "I know," Amelia said. "I'm just early." They stood in silence for a moment. "You look different," Amelia said. "I feel different," Veronica replied. Amelia nodded. "People say you're doing good. I'm trying." Amelia studied her for a second, then slid into the seat across from her. "Trying counts," she said. Veronica smiled, small but real. A year passed. Veronica was promoted to operations supervisor after 10 months. Not because of politics, because of work ethic. Colleagues who once avoided her now brought her into brainstorming meetings. The intern she mentored got a full-time job and thanked her in front of the entire staff at their annual recognition event. Malcolm stood quietly at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching. Later that afternoon, he ran into Veronica near the elevators. "You've come a long way," he said. "I've had good examples," she replied. He nodded. "Leadership isn't about titles. It's about how you treat people when no one's watching." "I learned that the hard way," she said, "but I'm still learning." "Good," Malcolm said. "Keep going." That night, Veronica walked home under the early evening sky. No headlines, no cameras, no viral clips, just the sound of her own footsteps, steady and sure. She thought about the girl in the cereal aisle, the man who chose to forgive her when he had every right not to, the job she never thought she'd be offered, the quiet respect she had rebuilt one day, one decision at a time. Because second chances are never given lightly. They're offered with hope and taken with humility. And when someone truly chooses to begin again, the world becomes just a little bit better for it. Everyone deserves the opportunity to change, but only those who truly change deserve to stay. 1 year and 6 months after that chaotic morning in the Nova Edge lobby, Veronica Langford stood quietly behind the podium of the company's annual Values and Vision Summit. The auditorium buzzed with over 200 employees, executives, engineers, interns, security staff. Everyone who kept the company running was in that room. Veronica's name wasn't on the agenda, but earlier that week, the CEO had asked her unexpectedly if she would be willing to close the event with a short message. She almost said no. She'd never been one for public speaking. And for so long, she hadn't felt she had the right to speak in front of a room full of people who had once read her name in a scandal. But Malcolm Carter had simply looked at her and said, "You've lived a story worth telling." Now, as the final applause from the previous speaker faded, Veronica stepped into the light. The microphone adjusted automatically to her height. She looked out at the sea of familiar faces. Some smiling, some serious, some still a little surprised to see her up there at all. She took a breath. "I wasn't always proud of the person I was," she began. Her voice was steady but humble. "I used to believe that status protected me, that if I worked hard enough, climbed high enough, I didn't have to question how I treated people, or what parts of myself I had let turn cold." She paused. "Then one day, I tried to humiliate a little girl in a grocery store. The room fell silent. I didn't know who she was. I didn't care. I saw her and I judged her in seconds. I took her dignity and stepped on it without a second thought." She looked down for a moment, then met the crowd again. That little girl was Amelia Carter. Her father is sitting right here today, Mr. Malcolm Carter, our chairman and CEO. And instead of destroying me, they gave me a chance to change. She paused again. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. "They didn't just give me a second chance, they gave me a mirror. They let me see who I had been and who I could be." She glanced toward the second row where Malcolm sat in a dark suit, Amelia beside him, now nearly 12, her braids longer, her posture proud. "There are many of you in this room who might have seen that video online," Veronica said. "Some of you probably had every reason to avoid me, but you didn't. You gave me space to work. You gave me silence when I needed to reflect. And eventually, you gave me your trust." She let out a quiet breath, then smiled a soft, grateful smile that hadn't existed on her face a year ago. "I'm telling this story not to relive the worst moment of my life, but to show that no matter how far someone has fallen, growth is possible. Real growth. It's not loud. It's not glamorous. It's quiet. And it's daily. You just keep showing up differently than you did the day before." A few heads in the audience began nodding. One hand clapped softly, then another. But she wasn't finished. "I want to thank Amelia for her grace, her strength, and her invitation to sit at a table I didn't deserve. You are far wiser than your years, and I will never forget that kindness." She turned slightly toward Malcolm. "And Mr. Carter, you didn't just teach me how to lead. You reminded me what leadership actually is. Not about power, about courage, about protecting the dignity of those with less. Thank you for showing me a kind of strength I never learned in boardrooms." A long silence followed, but it wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Veronica stepped back from the microphone, nodded respectfully, and walked off the stage. The applause began like rain, soft, scattered, but quickly turned to a full standing ovation. Amelia stood too, her hands clapping proudly. Malcolm didn't smile big. He simply nodded once slowly and clapped without breaking eye contact. Later that evening, as the team gathered in the lobby for closing drinks and small conversations, Veronica stood near the window, sipping sparkling water. Several employees, ones she barely knew, came by to shake her hand. "You gave me hope," one of the interns said. "Sometimes I feel like I'll never outgrow my past, but now I think maybe I can. Another said, that took guts. Real guts. And another, my mom watched your story unfold. She cried when I told her you worked here now. She said, that's what redemption looks like. Veronica didn't cry. Not then. But when she got home that night, alone in her apartment, she opened her laptop and wrote 2 letters. The first to herself, a letter she never intended to send, just to remember where she came from. The second addressed to Malcolm and Amelia. It read, Dear Malcolm and Amelia, there are moments in life that split us into 2 before and after. That day in the supermarket was mine. But the day you forgave me, that was the day I started becoming someone new. Thank you for not using your power to punish me. Thank you for using it to teach me. You changed my life, and I promise to spend the rest of mine paying that change forward. With gratitude, Veronica, she sealed the letter printed and handwritten and mailed it the next morning. Because sometimes the most powerful redemption stories aren't the ones that end in applause. They're the ones that quietly continue with better choices, softer hearts, and a new kind of strength. Everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone chooses to grow from them. When we do, we make space not just for our own healing, but for a better world, because forgiveness isn't weakness. And second chances aren't gifts, they're responsibilities. And sometimes the best justice is a life truly changed. The story of Veronica and Amelia is more than just a tale of confrontation and redemption. It is a quiet reminder that even when the world feels divided and cruel, compassion still has the power to change hearts. It shows us that second chances, when met with true courage and humility, can lead to the most unexpected and beautiful transformations. Sometimes healing doesn't come in grand moments, but in the small, quiet choices we make to listen, instead of judge, to forgive, instead of condemn, and to reach out, instead of turn away. Veronica's journey from pride to humility, from exclusion to belonging, reminds us that no one is beyond growth. And Amelia's quiet strength reminds us how even the youngest among us can teach the world about grace. And what about you? Have you ever been given a second chance? Or offered one to someone who didn't seem to deserve it at the time? Have you ever watched someone change for the better and felt hope because of it? If this story touched your heart, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your reflections. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that kindness is never wasted, and that redemption, when real, is always worth it. Thank you for being here with us, for listening, for feeling, for believing that a better world starts with better hearts.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.